Hi, Darcy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, I'm Darcy from Spacecubed, so it's very nice to have you all here today as we are launching into a post-COVID world here in Western Australia. We're able to actually come together to do wonderful things like this. So launching today our Lunch and Learn series, which is where we're enabling wonderful businesses and members within our space to showcase their wares and their knowledge with the aim to benefit all of our lovely other members within the space. So we're very lucky today to be joined by Ammo. Yeah!
How's it going?
This is Alex, so I'll pass over to him for the presentation, but any other questions throughout or after the session, you can see myself, Jordan, of course, who's brains trust behind the event, and Chanel, who's just run off but does all the other wonderful things. So welcome, guys, to Flux, and over to you.
Thanks. Okay, hey guys, I'm Alex from Ammo. We do digital marketing, growth marketing. We do it for startups and innovative companies in Perth and also outside of Perth. Some clients in the eastern states, some in Silicon Valley. Hum is one that we're really lucky to be working with. I say we, but it's mostly the other guys at Ammo. It's Jack and Liam and Cam and now Kai, who's our new hire. I sort of just distract them and occasionally make things look pretty. I'm the designer at Ammo. A lot of, what we deal with and what I deal with is helping startups who might not have, everything fully fleshed out with their product. Try to help them sort of navigate that uncertainty with a brand that's, maybe not too overdeveloped, not underdeveloped, something that's just going to help them grow, basically. So we're talking about minimum viable brand today. The real question is, what is brand? And I'm not actually convinced that many people in Perth know how to answer this question, and that includes people who you're going to pay to do it for you, which is a bit concerning. But so when we talk about brand, it's not just the visual side of things, and that's what a lot of people kind of fixate on because it's the thing that everyone can see. But brand is actually a lot of things. So this is just a small selection of what brand is about. You can see the brand name, who your customer is, what your product or service is, your price point. Think about how you feel about, a pair of pants from Gucci versus a pair of pants from Kmart. Price is a big part of that. The company values and how they align with your customers' values. The tone of voice that you use, are you irreverent? Do you swear? Do you use emoji? Are you very business-like? Marketing and advertising, customer experience, website, photography, stationery, partnerships that you do with other brands and suppliers. And then at the bottom you can see the more visual stuff, and the logo is at the very end, and I did that deliberately because there's too much importance put on the logo. So really, what brand is it's a customer's gut feeling about your product, service, or company. And so this is Marty Neumeier who says this, and he's written these two really good books. Actually, he's written a bunch of books. The Brand Gap and Zag. And I would recommend that if you are sort of like interested in brand, if you have your own startup or small business, that you should read these books. They're really short, they're really easy to read, they're very visual, and you can basically read them on a plane trip, and I think that's where I read them basically. That's the time that it takes to read them. And reading those books will give you a better understanding of brand and also help you hire someone who is going to help you with your brand if it's not something you can do yourself. So, bearing all that in mind, today this is basically what I'm going to talk about. This is we're trying to craft like a minimum viable brand. This is what you need as a startup to really get started, maybe build a website, maybe even create an app or even just app mock-ups and hit the ground running with something that's actually going to help you. So what do startups get wrong when they're building a brand? Sometimes they overinvest in brand, and that usually means they're going to waste money on branding when they could spend it on 100 other things that are more valuable to them at this stage. Marketing, customer research, developing the product. Usually they don't know enough about their customer to do a good job of branding yet, because branding is really about knowing your customer, knowing what they care about, and making something that appeals to them. And startups are pivoting all the time. They're changing their product, they're changing their customer, they're changing the problem they're solving based on new information they're getting all the time. And quite often, if they've overinvested in the brand, it's incorrect at that point. They have to change it anyway. So they may as well not overinvest in brand at the start. But you don't want to underinvest in your brand either. And there's a bunch of consequences to that as well. So, one of the biggest things that we deal with is even just the logo files that our clients supply us. They don't have the right logo files. They'll have a JPEG. They'll have like a PNG that they cut out manually, and it's all got jaggy edges and everything. And that's just, you're not going to be able to, put it on a banner at a talk. You're not going to be able to put it on someone else's website. If you sponsor an event, you're not going to be able to give them the proper files they need. It's just not good. They don't have a wide enough color palette to create effective websites. And this sort of goes into like user experience a little bit, but often when you have a single color, for example, a main color, you're really restricted in how much color you can use on your site, how you make your buttons stand out and make them look clickable, all of that sort of thing. And this is the most important part. And I think that it's really sort of underappreciated that if you don't look believable to the customer when you're running tests around like getting people to sign up for early access or anything like that before you've developed your brand, they're gonna know something weird is going on, and they're probably not gonna give you their details. So it's really about looking the part as well. You need to look trustworthy enough that people want to actually interact with you. So let's talk about names. See that? Brand names. So I gotta move the laptop. So a bad name makes your business hard to find and hard to remember. A bad name will also paint you into a corner. Okay, so think about, you see this quite a lot in handyman sort of businesses, and they will go like Joe's Kitchen Renovations. But if Joe wants to expand into, gardening, for example, he's got in his brand name kitchen, which means that either he has to change the brand name or create a sub-brand. And it took Jim a long time to get into the enormous sort of, Jim's mowing, Jim's plumbing, all of that sort of stuff. So it takes time to build up another brand, and a bad name will just basically make it hard for you to expand, to pivot, all of that sort of stuff. Good names have value, and they can differentiate you from the competition, and they can eventually turn into verbs. So, Uber, I'm going to Uber, can you Google that for me? All of these, that's when your brand name is really, really powerful. People start to use it to describe their own behavior. And so let's talk about criteria for a good name. And this also comes from Marty Neumeier. It's in one of those books, can't remember which one. But these are basically really good criteria for a good brand name. So distinctiveness. Now, you want to sound different from all of your competition ideally, but also, different in just the general space of names. Brevity, you want it to be short. Now, the biggest thing that I see when someone has not created a name that has brevity is that people will try to turn it into an abbreviation. So they'll turn it into a 3-letter abbreviation, and then you've lost all brand recognition and you've created potential for brand confusion. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. Appropriateness, you don't want to call your app. You don't want to put the name dog in your app name if your app has nothing to do with dogs. And I've seen that done. Easy spelling and pronunciation. When someone hears your brand name, they should be able to spell it without help. And when they see it written down, they should be able to pronounce it without help. So this is another thing that this is one of the first things that people tend to violate when they're trying to secure a name they really want, but it's basically taken. Likability, that just comes down to, is it fun to say or is it annoying to say? I like Google. Google is a fun name to say. And it's kind of got a playfulness to it. This one's a little bit hard to define, but you kind of know it when you hear it. Extendability as well, that sort of ties into, Joe's Kitchen Renovations. He can't really extend that name out. And protectability, is it available? Has the name already been picked? Can you get the .com? All of that sort of stuff. So you want to avoid trends in naming that kind of make you one of the pack or make you seem like a cheap sort of brand. So, this was a big trend for a while where people would try and copy Apple and put I in the front of their company name. It doesn't happen so much anymore, But I mean, does everyone remember when Vegemite did that iSnack 2.0? That was a disaster. So the other one is deleting letters out of your name. You don't see this one as much as well anymore, but you know, a lot of the brands that tried to do this no longer exist, or they got dissolved or something. And so read into that what you will. It just violates the spelling issue again. And then abbreviations. So don't create anything so long that your team or your customers want to try and abbreviate it, because the problem with a three-letter name, this doesn't have any meaning to it. And if a competitor comes out and changes one of these letters, say IPN, for example, you're creating brand confusion. And this is definitely going to happen. If you've ever searched any kind of three-letter abbreviation on Google, you'll see how many different definitions and results come up from that. They all contradict each other. It's impossible to find out what it actually means. So here's a good book for naming your business called Don't Call It That by Eli Altman. And this has a lot of really good exercises in it. You know, some of them include come up with 20 of the worst possible names you could give your business, and just to get them out of the way. And there's a lot of exercises like that basically help you free up your thinking and think outside the box a little bit, because all the low-hanging fruit, you're going to guess that pretty quickly. You're going to think about that. It's almost always taken. So yeah, good book. There's Brand New Name as well. And this one, the interesting thing about naming is that there's a lot of different opinions on it, and they often contradict each other. So what I liked about these two books is they kind of disagree with each other quite a bit. I think Don't Call It That sort of says more like leave it to the experts, and this book is more like you can do it and your team can do it, and if you just sit down for an afternoon, you'll figure out a good name. One of the cool stories in this book is talking about how the name Kodak was made. They basically just got a Scrabble board and they rearranged the letters until they found a name that they liked. And that it was a fictional name, but it had kind of like a punchiness, like a likability, like I talked about before. Okay, so let's talk about logos. Too many people talk too much about logos, but we're going to do it briefly. Don't get attached to your first logo. It's always awful, and you're going to get attached to it. You're going to get attached to your logo. It's just what human beings do. It's called the exposure effect. And if you come to me and say you want to keep any part of your old terrible logo, I'm going to get annoyed. So yeah, basically you don't this is why my advice around logos is sort of underinvest in the logo, overinvest in all the other brand elements that I showed you before. You just need to have it in a vector format, and it needs to be flexible. You know, it can't be too long so that it doesn't actually fit into the Facebook profile picture or the Instagram profile picture without being unreadable. Yeah, keep it really simple. Here's an example of a terrible logo. I know because I made it. I made it like 6 years ago, and I know what you're thinking. Oh, it looks really good. Like, you know, look at the kerning. Look at the subtle, reduction in the details on the shift. But it violates a lot of different logo rules. So let's have a look at some of them. Now, a logo mark, just is this. Right? This is the logo type, and this is the logo mark. So it's usually just the icon, some people call it. Logo mark should be figurative and not literal. That's just, if your logo mark is literal, it's usually just a bad logo. It's probably going to age pretty quickly. When we look at SIFT in this logo, maybe even these pixels here would actually be almost arranged in such a way would be a better representation of the idea, instead of putting a literal SIFT in there, which is like probably one of the uncoolest kitchen utensils there is. It needs to work in a single color, and it needs to work on a variety of backgrounds, and this doesn't. You can see that if we were to make this all black, it would just be a mess. This would be one big blob, and I know. And by the way, this is a logo for my brother's video game podcast, and he does this all the time. He just makes this black, and it's just this splodge across the screen. Yeah, so it doesn't really work single color. Should be scalable. If you were to were to reduce this down really small, you would lose all this fine detail in here. It would just look like a mess. And it should be simple, which it's not. Okay, so we can talk more about logos if you like. If you have any other questions as we're going through this, by the way, just put your hand up and we can always go back to stuff if you need to talk about it. Colors. You need more than one brand color. Black and white don't count. You need a mix of darker colors and lighter colors. Think about how you're going to do backgrounds. How is a color going to look on white and black, which you're going to frequently have to use. You just want to mix. And your brand's color palette is sort of one of the easiest ways to differentiate yourself from the competition. And in fact, if you're picking colors properly, you want to take a look at all of your direct competition and see which colors they haven't picked and pick that color. So often, your competitors will actually decide your color palette for you if you're doing this properly. Okay, so back to Pixel Sift. I fucked up again with the colors because all I gave him was yellow. And so the problem is, right, look, they've actually done a really good job with extending this out based on what I gave them. They've been using it for a while. But this is a YouTube feed, right? The problem is this is all different kinds of content. You just can't tell. So here is an interview. This is like a let's play where they just play a game. This one is like maybe a snippet of an interview. I'm not actually I'm not sure. But the point is it's all yellow. It all looks like Pixel Sift. But when I'm scrolling through this as a viewer, I don't know which is which. So that's just like a practical example of like why only one main color has really sort of painted them into a corner. By the way, I'm redoing this brand, so that's why I feel comfortable roasting it right now. I'm in the process of doing that. So fonts. Okay, get your first fonts from Google Fonts. And I would argue, when you're starting out, maybe just type out your brand name in a font and just leave it there, just so you definitely don't get attached to the logo. Pick a font that's got multiple weights. Google Fonts is really good for this. The majority of the fonts on there actually have a lot of weights. The problem, if you pick a font from somewhere else, they might only have like the font in bold and normal, for example, or regular. And you're not going to get this contrast that you see here between your bold and your light font. You're just going to have, you're not going to be able to see what's bold and what's not when you kind of have an overview of the page. And just to be super prescriptive with it, these fonts are good, safe fonts to pick. So if you don't know what you're doing with fonts, just pick one of these. Helvetica is really good as well if you've got a Mac. Don't pick Arial if you've got a Windows computer because it's just a poor man's Helvetica. Okay, so guidelines and consistency. It's important to note that consistency is one of the key pillars of having a strong brand. The YouTube feed before had a lot of consistency, so that was good. But yeah, maintaining the consistency is how you're going to actually build a good brand over time that people recognize. Store all your logo files in one folder that everyone in your team can access. It astounds me when we talk to clients how only certain people have access to the fonts and the logo files. It's going to get in the way of you being consistent if your team can't even be consistent. Keep the hex codes for all your colors. So this is the color code that you paste into websites, into, can you do it in Word or do you need RGB?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, this is really valuable. There's a whole bunch of color codes that you want to keep on file. Don't expand the palette on a whim and don't guess colors either, which I see people do all the time. Have the font saved somewhere obvious. If it's Google Fonts, just have the link to that Google font and make it as easy as possible for the team and partners to maintain brand consistency. So let's have a look at what it looks like when we kind of do a good job of this. So this is Drawbridge. This is one of our clients, a product of theirs. It's a securities trading app. It basically stops people doing insider trading inadvertently, and sort of on the website it says, don't become a headline, because this happens all the time. People sell their shares or buy shares at a time when they're not allowed to. So with Drawbridge, we basically took them through what we call our minimum viable brand process. We came up with a name for them, and you can see what we did here is we basically sort of followed all of the rules that I said before. we had something distinctive from the competition. You can imagine that someone who underthought the naming process might pick something like Secure Trade or like Share Watch or something like that. We kind of went figurative instead of literal with it. You know, what prevents access or allows travel? The drawbridge, you know, and it basically protects the keep from bad stuff. So yeah, drawbridge is what we picked. It was different, it was available, and we were able to create something really nice with this. I can talk to you a little bit about our sort of internal process for branding, for naming, sorry. It's actually pretty simple. We sort of just get in a room and start writing stuff on a whiteboard. But looking at glossaries related to the topic of your startup, or even tangentially related, is actually a really good way to start. Just go through the list and go, does that sound cool? You know, is that available? That sort of thing. So yeah, you can see the logo works black and white. It works on dark and light backgrounds, and it's clean. There's a logo mark here that can be used on sort of apps and favicons on websites and profile pictures and all of that. And you know, we have a color palette, and we also have fonts. Inter is a really, really nice Google font, very clean. And basically what we gave them was, it was given to the guys over at Exponent Labs? Exponent, software developers, and they basically made a really nice app based on just a little bit of MVB that we gave to the Drawbridge team, and they were able to expand on it. And you can see, you know, all the color palettes there, the fonts are there, everything looks really good. So yeah, that's sort of the presentation, but I'm interested to hear if you guys have any questions. Anything about branding. We sort of glossed over the, you know, what real brand, like deep branding is, but this is the sort of things that you can use to get started, yeah, with your startup. And if you want to check out our work, ammo.marketing, you can see, you know, the kinds of things that we do. If you want to get in touch, maybe we can help you with your brand. Yeah. Any questions? Who?
How long does it take you to do the full branding guide?
The style guide or the brand in general?
Branding.
So it depends. I do branding projects sometimes that take 3 to 6 months. That's usually very in-depth. There's a lot of different things we need to create. When we're doing, you know, like an MVB like we did for Drawbridge, how long did this take us, Jack? What, a week?
Well, in terms of like
we built them
actual sort of doing work of it, but the process itself probably took a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we built a landing page for them as well to direct marketing traffic to.
The naming took a while.
Yeah.
But not too long.
Yeah, I've done MVBs in a day before when things go really smooth and the client is very sort of focused on getting it done. Yeah, so you can do it quickly, you can do it, you can take a long time with it. It really depends on how in depth you're going. What I would say is, you know, in the first 6 months to 2 years, you want to be lightweight with your branding and do as little as you can to still be effective. Yep.
Did you 99 design that one?
No, this is me.
You were drawing?
Yeah.
Illustration.
Yeah. So I'm the designer at Ammo, so I do all the design stuff. Yep. And you know, we do outsource quite often. But we use local illustrators, for example. Like we have Storman, who's an illustrator. What's his Instagram? You should look him up. Yeah, he's good.
Did the shirt.
Oh yeah, Storman did this shirt design. He's awesome. He's basically really flexible. He can do any kind of, you know, this looks like a metal t-shirt, but he's done stuff that looks like, you know, 3D animated creatures and yeah. So we outsource when it makes sense. We often outsource to video companies as well. We know what we're good at, and we don't try to stray outside of that, you know. So yeah.
What would you say to like a B2B software company who doesn't think brand aesthetics are important?
I would agree with them. I would say B2C is where brand really matters, like big time. B2B, it depends on what your funnel is like, right? So your customer journey funnel. You think about MailChimp, and MailChimp has to sell subscriptions to their product without ever interacting face-to-face with someone. They're almost running a B2B company like a B2C company, a business-to-consumer company. That's why they invest a lot in brand, and yeah, their brand is really, really cool. But a lot of B2B companies can be wildly successful with something that was on 99 Designs or Fiverr or anything like that. You know, it's about personal brand. It's about relationships. What I will say is people need to be able to navigate your website. They need to be able to find the button that they need to click on. You need to have a base level of competence in your design that is important and is going to lose your customers if you don't do it.
This is more for brand application, logo application.
Mm-hmm.
But what would be any tips or tricks for applying branding to, for example, a company car? Do you go all out and just go, this is all my information?
Yeah.
Or do you just go, this is just my logo, and that's why?
Yeah, it depends on what you do, I think. So think about the unique ways that you can represent your brand with a company car, for example. So if you are an illustrator, you might want to create this amazing illustration over the entire car. If you are if you're like a car detailing service, you might want to make sure that it's like very minimal, and the key thing is just the car always looks pristine when you're driving around. I know, Louis, you do video stuff, so you know, how can you represent photography and video with the car or on the car? Something that just shows off what you actually do, because I think that would be the real value of having a company car, not just slapping your logo on it and some graphics or whatever, but giving people a preview of what it's like to work with you as a brand. Yeah, so look up if you can put a screen in the back window, because I think that would be cool. I don't think it's legal, but
illegal.
yeah.
Put my show reel.
Yeah, I think that would be super cool.
There was an approach you mentioned during the logo phase or the naming phase.
Yes.
Where you write down 20 names you would never use.
Yes.
Or come up with. And I was just wondering, it's like a half question, but if that kind of process happens down the line as well. So, you know, here's a color scheme, or here's a few taglines, or this is the look and feel that we're going for. And I would, like, if I'm doing research, I'd always go, what am I aspiring? Who am I competing against? Like,
Yeah.
what are the kind of animations that I really admire?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to always also find ones that you hate or you would never use.
So I think the only thing that you should, when you're collecting inspiration that's negative inspiration, it's really just about like, so everything in branding kind of falls under two columns. There's differentiation and there's relevance. So how am I different from my competition, and how am I relevant to my customer? So anything that you collect, you want to basically say, you know, if it's negative inspiration, you want to go collect all of the competitors' stuff, and how do we, you know, like he says in the book, like Marty Neumeier says, how do we zag when our competition is zigging? Because that's really, when you have an effective brand, it's the one that stands out, it's memorable, and you're zagging towards an unfulfilled customer currently. And if you're thinking, oh, well, I'm not really that different, and I'm not really addressing a customer that is underserved right now, then I would say, why are you doing this then? Like, what's the point of even starting a business? It's a lot of work, and if you're not actually going to bring anything new to the table that you can highlight, then maybe get a job working for someone instead, because it's not worth it. But my process with branding and stuff is quite a bit different from a lot of other creative agencies, for example, in Perth. I do all of the kind of ideation in my head. I don't really try to fully explore all these different directions. I usually kind of try to invalidate an idea as soon as possible before I put all this work into it. That's not how everyone works, but yeah, I would say collect any kind of inspiration that's going to help you get to your end point in the least amount of steps possible. So that might be collecting a whole bunch of negative inspiration, might be collecting just only stuff you really like. And I can give you a bunch of resources to look at brand examples as well. There's a website called Brand New that is awesome, and I think it's like a $20 per year subscription. They basically talk about every single branding project for every major company on a weekly basis. And they talk about, you know, what the thinking was behind it, all of the different elements of the brand, all of that sort of stuff. So that's a super good one to look at. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
But also a few other tips.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I work in apps a lot, and sometimes there's a thought that like the icon is more important than the name and the logo.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets used the most, you know, the button, the downloadable.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on how your app's going to be used, right? So I have like a shopping list app on my phone, and I think it's called Bring, but like you said, it's not really relevant. It's a shopping list app. I click on the icon all the time. I just need to be able to look at the icon. So I think for each business, there's a different sort of weight that you give to certain things. I would say that yes, if you're going to have an app that's going to be downloadable on the App Store, first of all, I would probably say start with a web app, and before that, I would actually start with So when we say MVB, which is what we're talking about here, it's actually based on the MVP strategy, which is when you're building a product or an app or something like that, these things can cost like $50,000 to $200,000 to make. There's always a simpler way that you can build it with existing technology, and that's sort of the mentality that we're using when we're building these MVBs as well. So what's the minimum you need to invest in order to test the idea? If you're building an app, I would say first start with an MVP. Maybe it's just Google Sheets linked up to a phone that you bought from Woolworths that people can send messages to, and then it somehow connects all together. But yeah, if you're building an app, the icon is a consideration. You should definitely pay attention to it. What I would say is keep it as simple as possible. I've seen people use icons before, like just downloadable icons as that image. I'm not sure don't know how good of an idea that is, because anyone else can use that icon and then create brand confusion straight away. So yeah, definitely if you're doing that and you're getting someone to do your brand for you, just stress the importance of that to them, because every brand is different, every industry is different, and they all have kind of slightly different requirements. Any other questions?
Further to that one, actually. So, for instance, in development, like you've got your brand name, however, you're not like sold on a picture that represents all that icon. Like, what is it unwise to then look at using? You said this before, because you don't want to make it confusing for the brand, but like just a Y that's slightly different, or like the letters from the brand itself. Yeah,
that's probably a really good idea to just go, okay, what's the first letter of the name? Let's just put that in a font against a color, and that can be our icon just to start with. You can always change it later. Clubhouse, they just had a picture of some dude's face as their icon. Like it was like a photograph. And it stood out because I think everyone else was going with icons and letters and all that sort of stuff. And then you have a photograph of a guy's face. So I thought that was like a pretty cool way. And they actually just released a new brand now that the app is dead and no one cares about it anymore. But they have a new brand now, and that's more of like a hand waving thing. But yeah, think about all of with branding, it's always a case of like, look at what everyone else is doing, and how can I do it differently? How can I zag? And you'd be surprised how many things you're assuming are mandatory that are actually nobody said that you had to do it that way. Yeah.
Another one, sorry. So I've like personally in site guys like this really bad habit of creating something like, oh my god, that's really cool. But then when should I be seeking feedback when I'm coming up with like a brand concept, and like how important is feedback and then actually listening to it?
Yeah, it depends who you're asking. So if you are asking friends and family, they don't know what they're talking about. They're too supportive. There's another book that I love called The Mum Test, and that book is about how do you talk about your idea to your mum without allowing her to lie to you, because she's definitely going to lie to you because she loves you. She's going to be, that's a great idea, sweetie. So you basically need to You basically need to trick her into answering your questions about your idea without ever talking about the fact that it's your idea. It's a really, really good book. It's really short, really casual as well. It's sort of in the vein of these kinds of books where it's just packed with information and it doesn't, yeah, it's really good. So The Mom Test is another good book. It's spelled M-O-M because the guy's American, but yeah. So yeah, when it comes to getting feedback, you want to ask professionals. So it depends on what you're getting feedback on. If it's visual stuff like the design and everything like that, talk to designers about it, I would say. And anyone else is kind of like, if you are going to ask them a question, ask them, direct them towards the kind of feedback you want to receive. So don't go, what do you think of this? And this is a mistake I still make. Don't just go, what do you think of this? Say, does this logo, or does this brand feel fun and approachable? Because it's for children. And that's what it needs to be. And then, just more broadly with your idea in general, talk to the people who you think are your customers and ask their opinion. Because theirs is the opinion that matters. They're the people who you're going to be selling to. If I asked my grandmother what she thought of this shirt, I know what she would say. But all of our customers, they go, oh, you guys have the coolest merch. And maybe they're just being nice, but I'd like to think that that they do think it's cool. And we differentiate ourselves because the other marketing agencies probably aren't going to wear stuff like that, and probably all of the other people they work with aren't going to be even dressed as casually as we are. And Cam wears board shorts to meetings sometimes. It's pretty, yeah. So yeah, get opinions from the people who actually matter. Those people are not your family and friends. It's not people who are not going to be your customer. And everyone will have an opinion if you ask them to provide one, and they all suck. So at a certain point, you have to believe in what you're doing as well, and hire good people to work to do the work for you, and trust in their expertise as well. So a good person is going to care just as much about you having a successful brand as you will. So yeah, work together with them and take a chance. Branding is all about taking chances and taking calculated risks and being different.
What's a branding logo design trend that you don't really like at the moment?
So we talked about MailChimp before, and they pioneered this really interesting way to sell a really interesting brand for like a startup, which was instead of using a serif font, which is sort of sans serif font, which is what we've got here, they used a traditional serif font, which is more like those old kind of Roman style, like a Times New Roman. Imagine that. They actually sort of was. It was like Cooper, but it was a really light weight of Cooper. The point is, it was this sort of like creative approach. It was this zag approach where everyone else was going for this really clean aesthetic. MailChimp literally put out brand illustrations and wacky colors. The illustrations looked like a child drew them, and the child, was troubled. But, it was so cool and it was so different, and everyone loved it. And now everyone's copying it. So now every startup is now following the leader, and they're all going with this serif font and these sort of fun, wacky illustrations.
The legs.
Yeah, and they're all just following along with everybody else. So I think that trend of creating a serif kind of sort of like a more organic looking brand for a startup is already kind of getting a bit played out, and I think it's going to continue to do so. The other thing is those faceless illustrated people that are really, really inoffensive that are on every startup website. They suck. So it doesn't say anything at all. It doesn't take any chances, it doesn't take any risks. And if I was looking at it, the fact that the people in the image are faceless, I think says a lot about how well you know your customer, what you think of them, all of that sort of stuff. So that's a couple of trends, but there's a lot out there. There's a lot of really good stuff as well, though. Like, I'd love to see more of it come to Perth and Australia. There's a couple of really good Australian branding agencies, like Universal Favourite in Sydney. But most of this work that I really love is stuff in America, and that's why I love pages like Brand New, because it shows international branding agencies and companies and the work they do. Yeah. What's the time? We done?
I think we can cut it then.
Yeah.
Cut it there.
What's?
I was going to say,
Any more questions? We still got 15 minutes.
yeah, we can mingle as
Yeah.
Sure.
well. Thank you.
No worries.
That's amazing. Thank you to MO Marketing. Like, I learned things. Did everyone else learn things?
Oh yeah, sorry. If you want to learn more things, we have a podcast called Weird Growth. We talk about founders and all of the things that they sort of do on their journey to grow. That's Cam. He's the director of Ammo, and he basically talks to all sorts of people. We just had a live event that Jack ran before. That was very cool, and it was actually in Louis' studio. We should throw more of them, and I think we're going to be throwing more of them in the future because it was super cool. So it's called Weird Growth, which is another good name, I think. I didn't pick that one, but I like it.
And the logo on that's quite weird.
Yeah, it looks disgusting.
Slimy.
Yeah.
It's really cool. But all right, well, let's hear it up for us. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, awesome. But yeah, definitely don't be today, guys. Hang 10, like mingle, pizza. Obviously, we're all wise people, but yeah, get to know each other while you're here. If you're interested in being a presenter at these events or attending again, you can reach out to Jordan at Spacecubed.com. That guy. Any other questions, let us know. But again, thanks so much to MO Marketing.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.